You ready? All right, y'all. Welcome back to Talking with Big Fella. Once again, we are not in the Kneecat Studios, which this man next to me is very familiar with Kneecat. He got shows over there, but we did it in a whole nother space. We're here at the Felavision Make It in Nashville Studios, and we have our city's vice mayor who's running for re-election, Mr. Jim Schulman. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Good. Thank you for having me, big
Oh,
fella.
man, thank you for coming, man.
Sure.
Thank you for coming, man. Okay, so first off, where you from?
Originally, I'm from Johnson City, Tennessee.
Really?
Yeah.
East Tennessee?
East Tennessee. And my parents were both born in the north. My dad was from Boston, and my mother was born in Brooklyn. And somehow they managed through a family business to end up in upper East Tennessee. And I was born in Johnson City.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
It's a similar story. I was talking to Dee Haslam was telling me a story about her family is from New York, and her father was doing production up there, and he was just like, I'm not raising my kids here. He moved to East Tennessee. They moved to Knoxville. What was it about? It's interesting.
Well, Johnson City is a great place. So it was a family business connection. My grandfather was involved in making boxes, like corrugated boxes. And he started a company up in Massachusetts, and then he ended up wanting to come south. So he opened a business in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Good. And my father was asked to come run it. And that's how we ended up in Johnson City. Great place to grow up, probably 35,000 people at the time. I remember, and East Tennessee State University is in Johnson City.
Okay.
So, you were at the foothills of the mountain. Everybody got along really well. East Tennessee State had a lot of programs going on, so you had a lot of stuff that would come into Johnson City. And then you had Bristol and Kingsport, so you had the Tri-Cities.
Yeah.
So there was always a lot of stuff going on in Johnson City, but it was also not too big. And I mean, it was one of those places where you grow up, you could do pretty much whatever you wanted to do, but it was also a really safe and loving community. It was a really nice place.
How'd you end up in Nashville?
Went to Vanderbilt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And stayed?
And stayed. Went to Vanderbilt and graduated undergraduate, and then went to law school and then stayed, never left.
Yeah.
I've been here for over 40 years.
Yeah, that's my story.
Yeah.
From Detroit. I came down here and went to MTSU. And
How'd you end up from, how did you get from Detroit to MTSU?
I went to Central Michigan my first year.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of crazy stuff go on up there, and the lawyer was like, you need to go to school in the South. And my father had just moved to Nashville from Atlanta. It was my father, my little brother, and my uncle.
Okay.
And I never lived with my father. And he was like, man, come on down here. And there was a chance to be with my father, my brother, and my uncle. So I came to Nashville to look at TSU. And this old dude, we were working at the Bellmead Plantation.
Okay.
And it was nuts. And this dude was like, hey, man, I heard you doing communications. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you should check out MTSU. I had never heard of an MTSU. He was like, Middle Tennessee State, man. It's like Tennessee State, but it's in the middle. I'm like, okay. So I went and looked and seen the studios, fell in love, man. It was like, this is where I'm at.
Tennessee is such an interesting place. I mean, it's such an interesting place to grow up in Upper East Tennessee. All my relatives, all my cousins are up north. No one else came down.
Nobody else
the
came.
South. No one else came to the South. So they come to visit, and they're going like, "What is this?" And we take them out and get them grits and, whatever. But Johnson City was a great place to grow up, and Nashville's been a great place to live. I mean, I've raised my family here, worked here all my life, and then ended up running for office, and it's a great place. Now, it's got its share of problems, affordability. I was driving around as I was coming over here. I was looking at more and more apartment buildings going up, and it's like, gee whiz, there's a lot of stuff happening. There always is.
It is.
And when a city like Nashville, which used to be it was kind of like a bunch of small towns all put into one.
All the way.
When it becomes a bigger city, which it has over the last 10, 15 years, it gets its share of problems, whether it's, again, affordability, affordable housing, getting around, traffic's a mess. You know, we don't have a good transit system. We have WeGo, but we don't have anything bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get on the interstates, and then the traffic backs up. Then you have rising crime. You know, there's always concerns about how are we educating our kids.
Man.
And now we're worrying about how we keep our kids safe.
Yeah.
So lots of issues flying around.
So speaking of like this being, it always to me seems like right now we got big city problems, but it still got that small town. I used to call it the biggest small town I've ever been to, you know, years ago. It still kind of got the small town thought processes almost, but these global companies coming in and they do this everywhere, so they know what they're doing. And it's like we're up against that, and sometimes you don't realize it's happening until after it happened. How do you, first off, as the vice mayor, what does the vice mayor do?
Well, what you see typically from the vice mayor is I run the city council meetings.
Yeah.
So the first and third Tuesdays of the month, that's what I do.
Yeah.
But I also, there's a lot more to it.
Right, outside of that, what is, what?
So, you know, you're always preparing for the meetings, you're analyzing what bills are coming, you're trying to prepare for what could happen during the meetings. But I'm also kind of second in line. So if anything ever happened to the mayor, then I would become the mayor. So
So it's like the president and vice president.
It's like the president, but I don't run on the same ticket as the mayor. So it's not like I didn't run on a ticket with
Right.
John Cooper.
Right.
We run separately, but we run citywide. The Metropolitan Charter created a vice mayor. And so the vice mayor is second in line. So if something happened to the mayor, the vice mayor would step in. And it's only happened once.
Yeah.
Happened when David Briley took over after Megan Berry stepped down. So that's when
He was the vice mayor.
he was the vice mayor. Yeah. Yeah, and when David became mayor, that opened the vice mayor slot, and I ran for that and got it. So it's only happened once before. I would say typically, most people probably even before that happened, most people forgot we had a vice mayor. Most people kind of forget that.
Yeah.
But the vice mayor's job is to run those city council meetings and try to keep them flowing and get the business of the city done.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So I get a lot of calls from constituents. I get a lot of calls from people who are not happy with council members. I got to step in when council members are feuding or fighting. I try to get that resolved. Make sure we understand the rules. Make sure I communicate with the mayor. If the mayor has information to pass back to the city, to the council members or to the staff, I do that.
Yeah.
And then I end up going all over town trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't vote unless there's a tie, and I don't bring legislation. But, I mean, we all have thoughts on how to make the city better, so we always are kind of throwing that stuff out there, even though I can't bring legislation. I can't do that.
But you got, like, people kind of got to listen to you, though. Like,
Well, let's put it this way. Okay, so I've always said this. One of the powers of the vice mayor, besides appointing putting people on committees and appointing chairs, is that one is I have access to the mayor on a frequent basis. I meet with him once a week. Okay. And if something's happening, I can take that in to the mayor's office.
so are you kind of like the go-between? Some with the council, you're kind of like the go-between the mayor and the council.
Well, so the council members can talk to the mayor themselves.
Yeah.
But if something's going on that really needs to be even kind of just a reminder to the mayor that something is happening, or if there's something happening to the entire council that really needs to be discussed, whether it's, infrastructure, whether it's traffic calming, or whether it's the Titan Stadium.
Yeah.
Those are things that I can go in and have a discussion with the mayor and say, okay, what's happening? When is this going to show up? How many resolutions, how many ordinances are we going to need? That type of thing. So we're prepared and we can make sure that the council is ready. Now, it's up to the council to make the decisions and make the vote.
Okay.
But anyway, I was going to say one other thing. One of the powers of I've always said one of the powers of the vice mayor, besides having access to the mayor, is that the department heads and the directors of all the divisions and boards and commissions, they know I could be their boss tomorrow. Okay, don't want to be their boss tomorrow, but they know that I could be, and so the relationships are pretty good.
Yeah.
So if I call and say just what's happening with this particular thing, they're really good about calling back. I mean, and they do that with council members as well.
Yeah.
But with the vice mayor, they know that I'm around, and I have things that need to be at least discussed with them, and they're really good about getting back to me and talking to me about it.
That's real. That's
Yeah.
real. Okay.
It's just one of those things.
So you've been the vice mayor. Do you feel like you've done a good job?
So I've been the vice mayor for 5 years. Took over for a 1-year stint and then ran for a whole.
So that 1 year doesn't count as a term. That was just kind of
right.
Okay.
So I can run one more term.
Okay.
This last 4 years was pretty wild. I mean, you think about all the things that went on.
Man.
It was a tremendous learning experience for me. I learned quite a bit. Usually the vice mayor, you don't ever hear from the vice mayor.
Yeah.
In this case, you heard a lot because there were so many things going on. Did I do a good job? I certainly hope people think that I did a good job. I did the best I could under some pretty trying circumstances, whether it's pandemic, bombing, all those tornadoes, all those things that were going on. And so we had to adjust pretty quickly. During the pandemic, we had meetings, people were at home. Then we had meetings in the Music City Center, and then we had meetings back in the chamber. And so we were trying to make sure that we could continue to conduct the city's business and keep it moving even during a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I was taught over the years, and I worked for the Speaker of the House, Jimmy Nafee, for 6 years in the state legislature. So a lot of the things I learned from him. So I was his chief of staff for 6 years. And it's, when he had 99 members of the House that he was trying to deal with, I've got 40 members of a council. It's a pretty big council. It's the third largest council in the country. So what you're trying to do is manage that ship. Some people call it herding cats, but it's trying to make sure that people get heard, that the public understands what's going on, and that all the public gets heard. And learned a lot about sometimes things work and sometimes things don't work in terms of trying to get all that managed. But the key is we got work to do. Council has business to attend to. We passed a lot of grants, a lot of contracts. We have lots of things that we're looking at in terms of everything from infrastructure to, major projects in the city. Yeah. And at the same time, we're also trying to pay attention to some of the big concerns, things that are happening to the city around us that we're trying to figure out how to better handle or control.
So tell me this. I don't know if as a vice mayor this has anything to do with you specifically, but when I was in Detroit, I went back up there probably 2013, 14, be part of the revitalization. And, they got this 50-year plan. Really, it was a framework. It wasn't really a plan, Detroit Future Cities, but it was beautiful. It was completely beautiful. I read it, and in it, there are, all the stakeholders are part of it. You got the business people, Quicken Loans, all of them. You got the community organizations, educate, everybody. And in this plan, because Detroit was historically a black city, I guess, there were pockets in like neighborhoods where Detroit had to have, and it was written in there had to be neighborhoods and pockets of successful, thriving black communities, black business districts, all that. But it was written into the plan. And then when I come back down here and I'm going through, and it was really first, it was hard to like find an actual plan. I know this next whatever it is.
The Nashville Next.
Yeah, I just got some of it, but I'm like, I was asking everybody I talked to, I'm like, does Nashville have to have black people? Does it have to have a thriving African-American community? And if so, that has to be written down somewhere, because if not, AJ Capital gonna buy North Nashville, and you can't get it back once them big firms get it. It don't work like that. It's not like the person from Bellevue is buying a house. It's like, no, this is a company buying a bunch of stuff that you got a hedge fund money to even try to get it back. And if it's not in a plan, that'll happen. Even if people say, yeah, we got to have a thriving black neighborhood, if it's not put down somewhere, it'll be gone as this city grows. I don't know if the vice mayor affects any of that, but what is your thoughts on that?
So we want Nashville to be welcoming and open to everybody. Okay, and I understand what your concern is. It's interesting you mentioned Detroit and a plan. I was on a call several years ago with folks from Pittsburgh and I think Denver and Greenville, South Carolina. And Pittsburgh is probably the best example of this. Pittsburgh in the 70s and 80s obviously was a steel mill town, so that's what they were known for. When things started changing and that production kind of went someplace else, Pittsburgh had to kind of reinvent themselves. And so they sat down and said, what do we want to be? How do we take care of our citizens and make sure that the city survives? And they became like a tech hub. They connected with Carnegie Mellon, which is a school in Pittsburgh, financial. And what they did was they kind of planned how they were going to go, and then they followed their plan. Greenville, South Carolina, smaller city, but did the same thing. And I think Denver did the same thing. I'm not sure if anybody thought 15, 20 years ago that Nashville was going to look like this now.
No.
So we're now kind of operating. I mean, we have plans, but the question is, do we have an overall plan, and how do we protect what we love about Nashville, but still allow for development to happen? It's like smart development.
Yeah.
And I know what the concern is. The concern is that somebody's going to come buy up all the property and run everybody out of here. Can you stop that? Well, first of all, you want to protect the neighborhoods the best you can, and you want to put resources into building more affordable housing and provide incentives to do that as well. But you look at downtown, it certainly has changed quite a bit. I mean, you got all that stuff being built at the same time. And then you try to get the messages out to the neighborhoods, protect your neighborhood. So you can do some of that through overlays and protections that a council member can put on. You can actually stop, you can make it more residential, you can put some plans on top of it, like specific plans to say you can't go outside of the scope of a size house or anything like that. You have historical overlays that you can put on things as well. I mean, one of the things that we keep hearing is that when a developer shows up and wants to buy a house, and maybe in a neighborhood where the houses are not $1 million, but they're more reasonable, they're $250,000. Yeah. I think what we want folks to understand is that they may get offered a lot of money for their house, but they may not be able to find another house to go to. Okay, so they may be at, if somebody offers them $300,000, $350,000 for their house, they may go, okay, where am I going to live after this? It may make sense for them to stay in their house because they have a good location, they're comfortable in their house. Don't necessarily just sell because you think you can move on or because they're offering you something else. Right after the tornadoes, if you went into both, I think, East and North Nashville, there were signs up saying, don't sell, stay. Yeah. And I think that was an effort by people in the community to say, this is your neighborhood, protect it. Do what you can and stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we want, again, there may not necessarily be an overall plan that you can flip to. There are different sections of that. But I think what you want is you want good, sound government. You want good policies. You want to make sure that everybody's kind of aware of where the city is headed, if you can. Yeah. And you don't want people, you don't necessarily want developers from out of state coming in and telling us what it's going to look like. This is our city. This is belongs to us. Yeah. We should determine what happens.
Is it possible? I don't know, you know the city council better than probably anybody at this point. Is it possible to have like outline like black business districts in Nashville? Like, is that a possibility or is that far-fetched?
Well, you want to protect, you want to promote small business. You want to provide incentives and opportunities, and if there's resources available, you want to promote businesses.
Yeah.
Whether it's minority-owned, women-owned, small businesses, you want to protect that. You want to do that. And so I think...
Can you say that? Like, can you say, like, okay, we're going to make this area Jefferson, like Buchanan Arts District, whatever. Can you say, this is a black business district?
Well, I think it's sometimes it gets that name, but
Without,
I'm not sure
not
if you...
technically, it's not officially called
right.
it.
So
okay.
I think what you're trying to do is encourage minority-owned businesses in an area. Okay, so you're trying to get grant funding and resources to those particular entities, and I think sometimes it works. I mean, so if you've noticed with Jefferson Street, you've got a new park over there. There were a couple of buildings that looked like they were falling in. Yeah. Those have been taken down. One of the things is always to try to promote getting resources into areas that need some help. Right. And one of those would be small businesses. Yeah. And again, minority-owned businesses, because you want businesses. I mean, that's the key to our cities. The key to this country is small business. Yeah. You want them to be able to find places to locate, to be able to afford the rent, and to promote themselves. Yeah. And so the more we can do that, the better it is. Yeah. We, for years, we have tried to hit certain percentages on metro projects in terms of minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, trying to hit those to try to make sure that we get, that the money is not just going to big, giant companies, that there really is an effort to get resources out to smaller companies. And sometimes I think we hit those targets and sometimes we don't. Yeah. But one of the things we talked about in this term that I'd love to see continue regardless of who the mayor is and who shows up on the council is that's something you can actually measure. If we've got a project and we're trying to get 25%, that's something that we can do. We can continue to do that. And then if we're not hitting it, then we should study and figure out why we're not doing it. Yeah. Do we not have enough companies? Do they not know how to get on the list for metro projects? Do they need special training? Yeah. What is it that they need in order to qualify to be able to be part of the overall thing? Because we want everyone to be successful in Nashville.
Yeah, that's what Cooper was telling me about with this stadium thing. He's like, man, it's supposed to be $1 billion or so, something like that, set aside to encourage minority business in it. And I was like, is there enough people here to fill that? And he was like, that's what we're trying to make that happen more. I'm like, okay, because that's the real question.
All right, well, look at Oracle is coming.
Right.
They're going to be here in within the decade, I would guess. They're going to need people to work at that company that are trained in software and software development. And so the question would be, okay, we've got people that are here now. We've got kids in middle school and high school that if we focus that effort and we teach those kids and train those kids, how to do that, then hopefully they're going to go right through. They're going to end up in college, hopefully with some help if that's what they need. And then they're going to be really good jobs waiting for them on the other side.
But at the same time, I heard that we the worst in the state with education. Like, how is that possible? How can the city be the bottom of education? Like, worse than some random backwood county like Nashville? The education is that's a mind-blowing stat.
So we always have to be trying to figure out how to do better. And I know that sounds, people say that all the time, but we have to focus in on what's driving those numbers. Why are we having trouble? And I think the mayor would come on and say, okay, we're putting money into the schools. I think this year's budget put in an extra $100 million into the school system. That's great. But we have to figure out why are kids having trouble, and what's causing those numbers to be down. Now, some schools do really, really well. Other schools struggle. How do we bring everybody up? How do we make it so that if we're going to put the resources in, which we will, we always put resources into schools. That's what we want. But we want kids to go to school and get opportunities, and we want them to look at what's going on with the state in terms of the third grade reading levels.
Yeah.
I mean, we want kids to be able to read, and we want them to.
Yeah, 'cause if you can't read, you're definitely not getting a job at Oracle.
No, so we got to go back and figure out what's going on. It's like everything else.
Is that a school board thing more than a council thing?
Well, so let me put it this way. Okay, the school board, oversees the schools. We, as the Metro Council, provide them with the resources. Now, we tend not to overstep on the school board and tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Having said that, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Whether, people say, well, the school board's over here and we're over here. We're all in this together. Our kids are so important that, and I will say that one of the most important issue I think right now in this city is making sure our kids are safe, both overall and at school.
Yeah.
Okay, but in terms of good quality education, we want to help in whatever ways we can in terms of the mayor, the vice mayor, the city council, working with the school board. We all work together because that's our future. We got to make sure that kids get those opportunities.
Oh man, yeah, that's like one of my rabbis used to tell me. It's like, man, they got too much short-term greed. You need some long-term greed, and it seemed like we need some long-term greed. But it's almost like all this stuff is happening to us. It's like boomtown politics. Nobody was really ready for it. It just kind of boom.
Well, it just happened.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we're trying to play catch up, but there's also things that we're trying to stay ahead of. And it's we have to keep moving forward with understanding that a lot of growth is happening around us and concerns about neighborhoods and concerns about all these big city problems. But we have to focus in. And I'll tell you, the last 4 years, as we were trying to do all that stuff, it seemed like, I think I gave the analogy of the old Lucy show. If you remember the old Lucy show, and there was a thing where she was working at a chocolate factory. The chocolate were coming out, and there were her and Ethel, and they were picking stuff off, and it was slow. They had to wrap them up or something. And then more started coming out, and then more started coming out, and they were throwing them everywhere.
Yeah.
It seems like these last 4 years, there was always something happening. Made it difficult. But, I applaud the council, I applaud the mayor. We got through those 4 years, have elections, and we go from there.
Well, man, I really, really appreciate you coming through.
Sure.
So much.
Thank you for having me.
Much. Oh, man, we had to, man. We had to figure out what the vice mayor does. And the election's coming up August 3rd. Early voting starts. I don't know when you're seeing this, but early voting should be right about now, or at least
it starts
the 14th.
Starts on the 14th, Friday the 14th.
Friday the 14th. The choice is yours. Who you going to choose? It's up to you. I'm talking to Jim Schulman, and man, we out of here, man. Where can they find some information on you?
Go to schulmanforvicemayor.com, and or just type in Jim Schulman. You'll eventually find information on me. But I appreciate you having me on.
All
this
good,
was really
man.
good.
Appreciate you too, man. Peace.